Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good day. My name is Kenneth Ray Coleman Jr. Don't forget the Junior. And you are tuned in to the Let's Talk About It podcast. We are on episode number 3, and we have a special guest on the line. This episode is entitled, I did have it up 2 seconds ago, What I've Learned from a Toxic Relationship. So we have a special guest on the line. I said she's our owner of Incense Skin Wellness and Business and Beauty. She's also works as a junior probation officer. She just loves what she does. She has a passion for our youth. She has a passion for skin and wellness, and all around an amazing person. I would like to introduce to everyone Santricia Addison. Excuse me. Welcome and thank you for being with us. So
Thank you for having me.
we talked about, well, I just introduced you and said that you have a passion in skin and wellness. What started that passion?
Well, it actually started partially because I had, some skin issues. I probably throughout my whole childhood I had skin issues. Was even bullied sometimes because of my skin. But then I ended up wanting to become a dermatologist.
Okay.
Like my senior year of high school, I was like gun ho about being a dermatologist. I was doing reports in class. They were like, talk about, whatever you have a passion about. Your like senior English class, and I was doing research on solar comedones and passing around pictures of like big old blackheads. So the students could know about solar comedones. So I've always had a passion for like service and health and skincare. And I'm a nerd. Like I love science. I love math. So this was just, the industry that I needed to be in. And then I became because my senior year of college, I had to change my major because the major that I had, I wasn't going to be able to graduate with that degree because they were closing the program. So I had to do some soul searching. So I ended up going to beauty school I was like, maybe I could do cosmetology, but I don't have a passion for hair. And then I saw that they had an aesthetics program, and I was like, why nobody told me about aesthetics? How long ago I could have become an esthetician. Even when I was in high school, talk about solar comedones, I could have been in beauty school, my senior year of high school. So that's what got me into it, and now I'm a teacher actually as well for aesthetics. So not only am I an esthetician, but I also teach it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so let's dive into this topic a little bit. What I've learned from a toxic relationship. So let's break it down all the way to the elementary level of it. How would you define a toxic relationship?
So I'll define both words. So when it comes to a relationship, I look at relationship as a connection. You have a connection with pretty much anything that you interact with, whether it's your job, you have a relationship with everybody that you work with, or anybody that you serve, whether you have customers or clients or whomever. You serve somebody, so you have a connection with them, even if it's brief. Um, so for me, a relationship is not just, the romantic, because that's what most people think when they hear the word relationship. They just think like, who am I in love with? And no, you have a relationship with your boss. You have a
Right.
relationship with food. You have a relationship with whatever you're connected to, spiritually or physically. And toxic is just anything that you are exposed to that has a negative impact. It doesn't matter how great or small that toxic is. If you drink a little bit of bleach because you had some still in your hands, or you didn't rinse the bleach off of your dishes if you use bleach water, and you get a little bleach in your water, you're not going to die.
Right.
But you don't have to go to the hospital. If it's like a tablespoon of bleach, you might have some stomach problems. If you drink a whole cup of bleach, you're going to probably die. So toxic is just about how much that you are exposed to, and that impacts you. So for a toxic relationship, for me, it's just that level of negativity that that impedes on your well-being. You could have a toxic relationship, in a romantic sense, where, you may have a spouse who is controlling. They could be narcissistic and gaslight you, and it impacts like your mental state where you're wondering like, am I really sane, or do I really feel like it? Are my feelings valid because they're tearing me down? Or you could be at a job, and toxic means that there's chaos, and there's a lack of structure. And anytime you're trying to hold your leadership accountable, they keep tearing you down or being petty, or there's cliques, and people are bullying you at work. So it looks different ways, but if you feel like your mental and physical are being impeded on, you're in a toxic relationship.
Yeah, I could dig it. I could dig it. I think I would define it as a relationship that is, kind of harmful, is unpleasant. It is a I won't, I'll go away from that, but I'll just say harmful and unpleasant. But I also would say that it's on course from taking you away from what you were created to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say it has all those elements, and it's a consistent thing. I think sometimes we like to, and we'll talk about it in a few seconds, but we like to label a relationship that didn't work out because it has moments of that maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to compare that to a toxic relationship where that's longevity, it's consistent, it's something
Right.
that's always present.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next question is there a difference between a relationship not working out and a toxic relationship? If,
Yes. I I feel like some levels of toxicity contributed to it not working out sometimes. But it could also be in an aspect of a more mild sense where, being equally yoked. Um, if you like where yoke come from, a lot of people don't understand equally yoked isn't just about, spiritually you gotta be both Christians or both Muslims or whatever. But being yoked means like I put two donkeys or two ox, on this yoke. Is actually called a yoke. And they two of them want to go in different directions. So they're not going anywhere. So the relationship didn't work out because we just were not able to go in the right direction together. This person needed to go left, and that was the right direction for them. But I need to go right, or I need to move forward. And that's the right direction for me. So it could be toxic contributing factors, but it could just be simply we're just not compatible because we just have two different ideas, two different, sets of values
right.
that just don't align properly to be in that level of a relationship.
Yeah, I could dig it. I think, we just live in a society that's big on throwing labels across, on people, on relationships, and that
Mhm.
absolves us of the accountability piece to really dive into it. So sometimes a relationship, excuse me, sometimes a relationship not working out is that, two mature people can come together and say, we're not compatible. Like we're not going in the same direction, or, I don't make you happy. I want you to be happy. Like it we just didn't work out.
Right.
Toxic relationship is just something that when you're in a toxic relationship, it drains you.
Hmm.
It sucks. Sometimes it sucks the life and energy, and it sucks out who you were created to be, as I said earlier. So there's totally different. Um, it's a big difference to me, if that makes sense.
It does. I think too, even going into that, I think sometimes people when we're in relationships, whether it's a job or a romantic relationship, even other types of family dynamics, sometimes we just be like, oh man, this relationship was terrible, but we don't think about what we could have contributed
Right.
to the demise. Like, it could be that maybe I just didn't know how to speak up for myself. I didn't know how to advocate for myself. Or, maybe toxic, like when I worked as a juvenile probation officer, for instance, I noticed that there was a lot of family dynamics that actually helped me realize some things about my life and how I grew up. And I was like, man, that's not normal.
Right.
Especially when you get trained about all these different things. And I also have a master's in leadership and public service, which is basically policy. And I have training as a civil mediator. and conflict management. So it's like all those different things when it came to conflicts. I was like, man, I'm getting taught on a theoretical level, and then applying that to like juvenile probation and helping with these families. And you have like the parents who are like, yeah, I'm gonna whoop my children just because, and it's like, well, what is the because?
Right.
And it's like, because they're children. And sometimes you just gotta whoop them just to, let them know like you're the boss. And it's like, well, do they ever wake up and just be like, Mama not the boss no more? Like that's not how people's minds think. So when you think that's a norm because that's how you were taught how to be, and then you're like, oh, these kids don't listen to me, these kids don't respect me, these kids cuss me out. Well, one, because they're used to you beating on them,
Right.
because that's become such a norm that you're thinking you're kind of keeping them in their place, and you're like, oh, these new kids, they don't even deal with whoopings, they don't receive whoopings. Well, it's because you overexpose them to that level of toxicity, so they become immune to this toxin called beating, physical abuse. And you never learned how to develop communication skills to talk to this child about what is wrong, why is something wrong. You're just on this high horse about trying to execute your level of authority. So I think sometimes people aren't willing to sit and just do the work and think about as well, like, could I have been the toxic person? Could this relationship have fallen apart because I contributed to some of my toxic ways? Like, um, I don't think that I should have to cook. So you go cook. Also, since you have to cook, you need to also go grocery shopping. And
Right.
since you cooked, you messed up the kitchen, so you need to clean up the kitchen too. But then it's like, well, what are you gonna do? Just eat the food? And it's like, don't you think that that person's gonna get exhausted after they had to do the grocery shopping, figure out what meal to make, cook the meal, and wash the dishes and put the food away? They got exhausted. So it may not have been that, oh, they didn't want to cook for me anymore. They didn't want to serve me. They didn't want to, be my partner and do things for me anymore. They probably just got worn out by your actions, and you just weren't willing to be accountable or reflective about what they were actually trying to communicate to you.
And I think, in order to, I guess, I guess the self accountability thing is important because a lot of times we have to heal before we
Hmm.
really could see um, how our actions are impacting other people. Because I'm big on, what happens when somebody says your normal is unhealthy? Like the things that I'm
Mm,
used to doing, as you was just alluding to, like this is how I was brought up. This is what I've always done in previous relationships. Like your normal could still be toxic. Your
mhm,
normal can still be unhealthy. And what do
mhm,
you do with that when somebody brings it to you? A lot of us, sit in our comfort zone and still be the same person that we're going to be. And I
mhm,
tell people all the time that, um, you know, we live in a society that don't want to change. We're not big on change. And so you can find somebody who will accept you just as you are right now.
mhm.
But the question becomes, will you be happy? Will you be pleased? Will you be satisfied? Is that
Yeah.
somebody that can activate the potential or the good that's in you because of you staying how you are? These
Mhm.
are questions that we have to ask ourselves when we're dealing with relationships. And this is on our job, with our kids, with our significant other friends, whoever.
Yeah.
So what would you say? What's a misconception about a toxic relationship, if any?
I think a misconception is like, I think about the word narcissism, or like borderline personality disorders. A
Okay.
lot of times, since we live in a world of DIY, which is, is normal. That's literally how experts came about, is somebody had to do it. Somebody had to come up with a thought, and put it into practice, and they became an expert with it. But saying that, a lot of people have misplaced definitions to certain situations. So people just think, oh, well, toxic is he has to be a narcissist. And it's like, well, everybody who's toxic is not a narcissist. They may have narcissistic qualities and traits, but they do not have the actual definitive, like, the whole like aspect of to have a prognosis or to be diagnosed. with the actual borderline personality disorder called narcissism.
Hmm.
I also think that from my experience, especially being a woman, there are some people who will say, well, I wasn't in a toxic relationship. He's just overprotective. And it's like, well, over means too much. So therefore, toxic means I was exposed to too much that I could handle, more than I could handle, or more than what was necessary to have to do. Because just because I can handle it don't mean that it was necessary. You know, I could drink to drunkenness, but that does not mean it was necessary for me to drink that much alcohol. You know, to be drunk. But with that, you know, some people will say, well, he didn't hit me, but that doesn't mean that they're not abusive. There's like when I was in my relationship, just being transparent, my marriage, my husband was not physically abusive. And he wasn't verbally abusive in the sense of like, oh, you're ugly. Um, but it was like a cultural verbal abusive, you know, like, oh, you Americans or this, or,
Hmm.
you know, you women, this, you know, so it wasn't like a direct attack like you Shantricia, you know, unless it was like you're stupid. But outside like calling me stupid, like it wasn't anything else. And it
Right,
was more
right.
of like an anger projection calling me stupid, not like he really truly believed that I was a stupid person. But financial abuse, I had to learn that in that relationship. Well, you know, like withholding funds or going to close a joint bank account and not telling me just so I wouldn't get access to the money. So no, I wasn't getting beat on. I wasn't being sexually assaulted. Um,
No, you go ahead.
oh,
I'm sorry.
okay. I wasn't being sexually assaulted. I wasn't getting beat on, but I was being financially abused. You know, from me spending, you know, money on bills and trying to, you know, cook and clean and you know, I'll be in the middle of taking a shower and it's just like, hey, here's the phone, talk to these people. And it's like, I'm literally in the middle of bathing. Can I bathe? You know, and not talk to Comcast. Can I please do that? Um, so it's stuff like that, like it's toxic, you know, either way, just because that was something that I wasn't exposed to, or there was not a definition that was told to me
Right.
about this and how it was wrong, it was still toxic.
I think you actually made me change my answer because you brought up a good point and you said when you have too much of something. So I think the misconception about a toxic relationship is sometimes a toxic relationship is when a person is giving too much of something good also. It's not always a
Mm,
negative thing. You know, sometimes you can be overly nice, you can be overly considerate to somebody who's not used to that treatment and it becomes a toxic relationship because of their reaction, their mishandling, misguidance of that good. So we
yeah.
focus, and rightfully so, we focus on the negative aspect, of a toxic relationship. But there's been some, friendships. There's been some job ships that I've been on that I've gave a lot of good to, and it wasn't received because of a good manager or a good supervisor. So we had to be careful with that also. So that's my misconception.
I think that's a great thing that you brought up because one of the things I teach my students is your strength is also a weakness. It's just how you use that particular like trait or, you know, characteristic about yourself. Like I'm a team player. So I would give and give and give, no matter if it's a romantic relationship, work relationship. That's just how I was brought up in the aspect that, you know, I only had one brother. You know, if people in the family, if your cousins fighting, you gotta fight too. You know, if you in the fight, because they in the fight, you cannot come home and talk about, yeah, they was over there fighting. What did you do? You just sat there and watched. No, you gotta jump in too and fight. Even though that is toxic. You like teach kids de-escalation skills. But you know, I was a team player. I joined sports. I've been in band all throughout elementary school, all the way to college. Um, so even in romantic relationships, I'm a team player and I had to realize you give too much of yourself. At work, I had to learn you give too much of yourself. Start putting up better boundaries. And so that you could preserve, because you have to be there for the team, but you can't overwork yourself. If you overwork yourself, they got to find another teammate. So essentially, you were you contributed to the demise of the team because you gave too much of yourself and did not allow other people to be supporting roles
Right, right.
in whatever goal you were trying.
Yeah, I like that phrase, what you said. Sometimes a lot of times your strength can be your weaknesses. And that's why it's so imperative. And you have to be intentional with the people that you have around you because
Mm-hmm.
they will be able to activate if it is a strength or they'll use it as a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Does having a toxic relationship mean that there are toxic people in the relationship?
Um, I think that's a tough one. When I think about toxic, sometimes people think that people are intentionally toxic. And I really don't always think that. I think that's like a small percentage of toxic dynamics are people who are intentionally toxic in a relationship. I think a large part of it is just how you were brought up, what your mental state is. And sometimes you just so used to doing something a certain way and it's bad
Mhm.
that you just think it's normal. Like there are some men who will just be like, I want this kind of woman. I want the light skin, long hair, big booty, big boob woman. And so then it's like, oh, okay, well, I want that woman too. Or I want this woman who's like docile. Or a woman who will say, I want a man who works. And I just want to be a stay-at-home mom. And stay-at-home mom for them means I stay at home, I cook, I clean, I take care of the baby, and I go spend all his money. So there's different types of dynamics, but that doesn't mean they're intentionally out here being predatory.
Right,
It just may be that that's what they saw. That's what society is saying that you're supposed to be. So you don't allow yourself to be genuinely who you are supposed to be.
right,
So, and then it just mean you just, you know, gravitate towards another person who you can actually have a relationship that's toxic, because you can't have a toxic relationship with everybody, because some people won't even allow you to get to that point in their life to even develop that kind of relationship or a relationship at all. It might be somebody who's just like, your vibe isn't right and I'm fleeing from you. Like some people will say, I attract the same person all the time. Why do I only get this type of person? Why do I only get people who cheat? Why do I only get people who are broke? Why do I only get people who need to be fixed?
right,
And it's like, well, we have to do the work to figure out what are we doing to attract those kind of people, and what are we not doing to protect ourselves, to be hyper vigilant about, being able to identify those kind of people so that we don't attach ourselves to those people, you know, when it's too late.
I had to go look up that word later on, hypervigilant, so I can put that in, add that to my vocabulary. So that's a good answer. I like that. I like that. For me, it's a yes and no. Some toxic relationship, you do have toxic people. In some relationships, I use it as a chemistry reference. Sometimes when you put two components together, it equals a toxic answer. And so by yourself, you
Mm-hmm.
might be good, you might be cool, but when you come into someone else and y'all activate each other vibes and energies and y'all get around each other, like it creates a toxic environment. So I think you have to be aware.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I always, tell people like, know your vices. Be so in tune with yourself that when you're around somebody, it throws your energy off or it throws you off, and then you make decisions based on that. Sometimes your work environment is messed up
Mm-hmm.
because your goodness added to that negativity is not a good answer. So you have to be cognizant to yourself, like know who you are, like know what you're about, and then be selective in who you give your energy to.
I think that's good, even when you're talking about like work. A lot of relationships, whether it's home, like family dynamics or romantic dynamics, sometimes we don't. we also don't protect ourselves from the other influences. You know, like if I have a like when I worked in probation, for instance, that was a very traumatic job. It's just what comes with the territory. You just can't not have a toxic experience
Right,
working
right.
with people's problems all the time and going to court and sending people to jail and, separating families. Like it's just the nature of the job. But if I had a spouse who could not listen to me vent, because I'm a venter. So if I had a spouse who could not, listen to me, come home and be like, look, let me tell you what all I had to deal with today. Let me tell you about this kid. Remember that kid from last week I was telling you about? Let me tell you about them, what they did to me today. If they could not handle that, it's not that I'm a toxic person per se, with my intentions, but because my job is just not the right fit for us to have the dynamic in the relationship that we want. Um, or I have a business. If I just jump ship and was like, oh, I'm gonna quit my job, and we had every intention, we even planned it out, and I quit my job, but whoever my spouse is, like, he lost his job and I'm trying to build my business. So I don't have any money, and now he doesn't have any money, and now we're frustrated. And it's just that those circumstances brought out that negativity, you know, in us, just because we couldn't deal with the issue.
And I will say this, you have to be careful. Once you get into a toxic relationship, sometimes it's a domino effect. Because I know for
Mhm.
me, I've had toxic friendships that bled into relationships, toxic relationship at church that bled into and created a toxic relationship at home that created a toxic environment at work. And so if you're
Mhm.
not careful, um, it's going to trickle down in other areas. So you got to experience some goodness in order to get rid of that toxic behavior. So, but let's go ahead and get into this meat and potatoes, because I know this for me it was a long list, so I had to shorten it down. But what are some of the things that you learned from toxic relationships?
Um, Things I've learned. One is, what are some triggers for me? What are some things that, I'm a very self-reflective person. So I always try to find a lesson to be learned out of every situation, but I'm very, very intentional about not accepting victim blaming. Like if this person treated me a certain way, their response was their choice. No matter how I treated them, the way they chose to respond to me, they chose to respond that way. So with that, if anything in my relationship didn't work out, no matter which ones I've had, I always think about, like, what could I've done differently? Because I'm only in control of myself.
Right.
I'm not in control of how that person is. They may be a toxic person. Every relationship they get in is going to be toxic because they are the common denominator. If I'm always attracting men who seemingly need to be fixed, how quickly am I being that, like, oh, how can I be nurturing and, help you through your problems? Do I need to just sit and just let that person just vent to me and not be quick to provide a solution for
Right.
that person, or even like force my way to be like, oh yeah, you're hungry, let me cook, and they're like, no, no, thank you, I don't really want no food because I'm picky. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out what foods are they willing to eat because they're so picky, or how can I convince them to eat a freaking avocado because avocados are healthy for you. It's like, just slow down and just let them be, and let them decide when they're ready to, do whatever. And you just keep moving about how you move because they're still around for a reason.
Right.
So that's one thing I've learned. You know, um, don't be so quick also, especially like as a woman, for me to not be so quick to always feel like I have to explain and defend myself. Just because somebody doesn't agree with me or they're only listening to respond and they're not listening to understand, don't be so quick to be like, but I see the potential in you. You're a smart person, you're a strong person, but understand how smart I am too. Like, I don't have to prove anything to you. Because if you're only listening to respond, you're choosing not to value me anyway.
Right. Right.
Um, so, even with, I'm a quiet person, I'm a resilient person, but at the same time, everybody has their limits. So I'm very big on like doing relationship check-ins. Like, hey, how's it going? Like, how have I made you happy this week? Tell me, what did I do that made you happy this week? How are you feeling? And really truly give me your honest opinion, because say you out here and you're doing something you're not supposed to do because I'm not fulfilling your needs. I'm not making you happy. And then I'm a quiet person, and if I get into that savage mode, I'm not gonna yell, I'm not gonna nag. I'm gonna be like, okay, honey. And you may come home and you may not have a car. Like, but it's like, don't ever allow, I've never done it. But I just know like that's the things that, go on in my head. So understanding those things, like if somebody's getting me to that point that I start to think those thoughts, that means that I need to figure out what do I need to do to be more preventative. I'm not a react. I try not to be a reactive person. So I'm finding myself fighting and trying to be as proactive as possible, and this person isn't, trying to help in that process, that means I need to leave. Why
Right.
keep trying to work and fix something if you're the only person that's fixed? Because I will get passion burnout really easily. Um, but I'm a very loyal and dedicated person. But I have to understand that everybody does not deserve my loyalty and my dedication, so that I can have something to give to the person who does deserve that.
I could dig it. I could dig it. Well, just a follow back question real quick. What is one of the triggers that you've learned that caused you to be in a toxic relationship, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I don't mind. So one, I had told myself before I got married, because I had a very toxic relationship with my child's father. One of the things I learned was, don't play fight. Like, don't allow, don't go around and be like hitting on him, like, oh, you look at your stupid self, and just go and pop him. So therefore, don't allow him to, do those little subtle, like, I'm a smack you kind of thing. Those little,
Right.
it's a difference, but like, don't hit me on my arm like you're trying to like reprimand me, those kind of hits. Um, if somebody, if a man like shakes you when he's angry, leave. He's shaking because he's out of control. He doesn't know how to handle his emotions. Shaking means that he's trying to not hit you. And if it gets to that point where he's put his hands on you to shake you, he's going to probably hit you the next time. So I had to understand like how to look at certain things, because I'm the kind of person, if you start putting your hands on me, I'm going to fight you. Because I'm gonna start thinking like, oh, I can handle it. I can fight you back. I took fighting classes. I did MMA. Maybe I could do. If I gotta take my mind to that point, then we don't need to be in this relationship. Because I always tell people, if a bear try to fight me, help me. Please help me. Don't help the bear. Help me. But just know that if I die, I'm gonna die with honor. That bear is going to remember me. Um, that bear might be having to be one-eyed Joe or something, but he's gonna remember me. But with that, it's still not a good thing to think about when you're, a man on the street. Yeah, he's somebody gonna know that he did something, even if I'm dead. They're gonna be like, who did you do it to, and where are they? But a romantic relationship, it should never be that way. You're gonna have fights. You're gonna have conflicts. You're not gonna agree on everything. But when you're starting to, when I go through the process of thinking like, dang, like if I say this, are we going to have a debate over something simple?
Right.
Then I know that I don't need to be with this person. If I'm giving, 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 and I'm like, they're like, be patient, be patient, be patient. No, I don't need to be with them, because it's like, how long do I need to be patient? You never gave me a timeline.
Right. Right. I could dig it. I could definitely dig it. Yeah, those are some good things that you can learn from a toxic relationship. Definitely understanding and knowing your triggers. Just a few things that I learned from toxic relationship is that I was I was an expensive gift that I gave people too many discounts to purchase.
Mm.
Um, I wasn't big in knowing and understanding my worth and what I brought to the table. I've
Mm-hmm.
always known that I've been a, quote unquote, good guy, had good qualities, but I had to learn like, nah, you're just not good. You are one of a kind. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're something special that don't come around often. So people got to pay for that. Like they got to be willing to sacrifice in order to have a relationship with you. And I think the last thing I learned is that, and I think I'm still learning that some of my triggers and scars, I say this often, and I even posted it on Facebook, but I had to realize that some of my triggers and scars I'll never be able to heal from. I have to learn how to manage them now.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I've learned that, like that puts me in a different position. And why is that important to me? Is because you got to realize in any type of relationship, there are going to be some people that hit your triggers, that touch your scars, but I should not react in a way that they cause them scars.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you understand that concept, you're able to give them grace and a little bit of mercy, or you're able to understand and have a conversation with them, which is important to have. And so
Yeah.
once I learned those things, I was like, just because this puts you in a mind frame of an old toxic relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is it now.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Like, and that's when you focus on like the actual problem. And I think a lot of times it took me going to school and learning that theory of you focus on the problem, you don't focus on the person.
mm,
And when we learn how to focus on the problem at hand, we can actually sometimes come to a resolution and figure out where the source is and put it out together. Like when I was my current job, I understand where the problem is. When I stopped focusing on like, oh man, this person's making me mad, this person's making me mad, and I was like, where is the common source? Where is the source coming from? Because it's like I've been there longer than everybody that's an instructor. And I'm like, okay, all these different people are being hired, but I keep finding myself in issues. No
mm,
matter how many times I provide a solution, I create a document for accountability. I'll send out emails to everybody for accountability and communication. I will go and just buy something because, funding isn't being provided. So let me just go spend my own money. And I'm like, okay, there's still a problem.
right,
Why I keep finding a problem? And then I'm like, oh, I see where the problem is. It's not the people that I'm arguing with. It's not the new people, they don't want to be trained or they don't want to listen to me for whatever the reason is. It's not them because the organization is only going to allow you to do so much.
right,
So understanding that in any kind of relationship dynamic, you may feel like, oh, well, this sibling gets to do more than I'm able to do. Well, have you talked to your parents and say like, hey, I feel like there's a level of like, inequality here or discrimination or, because sometimes it is discrimination in sibling and family dynamics. Or I feel like, you just favor them. And it may be, oh, that you don't like my dad and you loved their dad.
right, right,
Um, or I remind you of Uncle Joe because I look like Uncle Joe and Uncle Joe has, hurt you. And I never knew that. Or you may have overheard a conversation that I said, and I never knew that you heard those words. And I can now have opportunity to explain to you what I meant, the context behind that conversation. Like, being able to focus on the actual problem instead of just like, oh, mama doesn't. That doesn't mean to me. And he gives, or me siblings, we have this dynamic of who's better because there's a favorite one and I'm the black sheep. Once you're able to really like figure out what the problem is, a lot of times, even romantic relationships, sometimes those relationships could be salvaged if we just knew how to have a conversation instead of like who's right and who's wrong.
amen, amen. Let me get your cash app so I can send you a few dollars because you preaching and teaching on this morning. This afternoon. But I think one of the things that I've lived by, and it's a intentional attitude that I have to practice is that, you gotta don't take things personal.
Mm-hmm.
When people talk to me, when people treat me in a certain way, no matter the relationship that I have with them, I try not to take it personal. And that's how I'm able to get to what's the root of the problem, or what is the real issue that is having right now. And that's why sometimes I had to realize that even with me, but I had to see it through an outside source, is that you didn't cause my scar, even though you touched it and it made me feel some type of way. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
treating you as the first day I had the scar, and I'm going off on you. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I realized that, I was like, "All right, you got to take a step back. Like, you are unhealthy, and you're having toxic traits or behaviors, or you might be the toxic one. So you need to calm down. Like, you need to take a chill pill." And when you're not, you see, one of the things that we do is that the reason why it's hard to have to rectify situations is because we take the pain personal. When someone hurts me, I take that pain that you just gave me as your personal, like you saying I don't have value, or you're saying that I'm not enough, or you're saying whatever, whatever. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's just you triggered something, and I reacted in this way. It necessarily
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to do with you as an individual. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of relationships, I don't care if it's children, in whatever type of relationship it is, we can never come to the middle ground and realize that it's not about you. And you said
Mm-hmm.
something earlier when you talked about how, children are treated. Sometimes it's not about the children. It's not that I have a disdain or a dislike for my child. It's really something is triggering me, and I'm taking it out on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why healing has to take place, because that's the only way you learn how to effectively communicate and say some things. A lot of times that, and I'll say this and go to the next question, I'm sorry, but a lot of times we can't talk to each other because we use our words as weapons instead of tools
Mm-hmm.
to remodel a situation. And so when you're using your words as a tool, and everything is this, and you attacking them maliciously, intentionally, and on purpose, like, then we always feel in some type of way every time we saying something to each other. So we have to be selective in how we use our words. So okay, I'm done. I'm sorry. My bad. I'll go on mute.
Yeah.
So what got you to the point that you started to pay attention to what you learned from the relationship?
Um, I think one, because that's just my nature is to be self-reflective. But I just really had to think about like what I want. Because I am dedicated, I'm loyal. Of course, so that means I'm not the type of person that gets in relationships and like, oh, if we break up, we break up. Like I'm gonna give you my all. But when I got out of some relationships, and I'm like, you go through the little hurt part, right? You're
Mhm.
trying to keep it going because you can't see life without this person, and maybe, just maybe, things will be different. And then when you finally break up, it's like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do now? Like I can't call them, but I'm used to calling them every day. I can't go visit them. I'm used to visiting them every day. So what in the world do I do in my life? And, sometimes we don't know how to live without people. And so I had to teach myself, like, it's okay to learn how to be alone. It's not a shame to not have somebody, even though our society teaches us that. Like, sometimes people don't even ask you your name first. There were times I would start a job and people would be like, hey, how you doing? Are you married? You got kids? Like, my name is Shantricia. That's my name. Um, Me being married and having children doesn't have anything to do with me being able to roll some silverware at this restaurant. So that's my name. My husband doesn't have anything to do with So I think sometimes like really like taking that time to say, forget how people may feel, forget how people may act, the friends you may lose. I had to go through that awkwardness of when I broke up with my child's father the last time. We weren't in high school anymore. We were in college. And so we had a lot of mutual friends from being in Birmingham in high school, and then going to Nashville, being in college. And I was like, I don't want to be in an abusive relationship anymore. And when we broke up, it was like that awkwardness around some of our mutual friends. Like, do I talk to her, even though I'm really friends with him and he's not here, but still, and so, but I had to be okay with it. Um, so like taking that time to think about those things, like don't think about how people feel. Um, because a lot of my insecurities came from what people would say to me, about like how I looked, how I acted, how whatever, so I had to like check myself about my insecurities. Like, you're enough, it's okay. Those who have a problem with it, that's their problem. And you keep it moving. Um, so yeah, I'm a very self-reflective person. I just really had to just take that time to like think about like, why do I feel the way I feel? Even when there's times where I may act arrogant, and I've had people to like check me for it, be like, why are you sizing this person up? If you don't like to be sized up, why are you being arrogant and sizing people up? And it was
Mhm.
like, when I really thought about it after a while, I was like, I do that. Like, they don't even do lashes right. And they over here getting all these people and these people lashes wrong. And then they coming to me trying to get their lashes fixed. If she just did the lashes right. And it's like, well, why are you focusing on her though?
Right.
Or she don't even know how to spell right. And I know how to spell. But see, y'all go to who y'all want to go to. So y'all want to patronize people who don't pay attention to detail. And it's like, well, that's who they chose. You don't know why they chose to go to her. They may like her spirit and they just may not have been attracted to yours. So you might need to check yourself and just be a
Right.
little bit more humble.
Hamburger with the Sweet Baby Ray sauce. I got it. I got it. I think two major factors got me to where I started paying attention to that made me want to learn and gain knowledge, number one, and then learn and then use the wisdom from what I learned. But number one is I knew the desires of my heart, and I knew where I was going, the trajectory. I was never going to get the desires of my heart. And
Hmm.
so when I had that, I guess that level of void or that I knew something was missing. I
Hmm.
was just like, nah, let me focus on what I brought to the table. Or let me focus on what I didn't do right. I don't focus on what I forget them. It's all about
Hmm.
me. And I'm like, okay, what could I have done better? What did I need to do? What didn't I do? And so
Hmm.
I started learning from that aspect. And just the other thing is that I'm always like, okay, put it to you like this. If I'm in the same situation and I keep getting the same results, then I know I'm doing something wrong. I don't know what
Hmm.
I'm doing wrong, but I know
Right.
I'm doing something wrong. So let
Absolutely.
me investigate what I'm doing wrong so we can change this result or to see if it's
Hmm.
something that even can be changed up. And I share this with you and we go to the next question. But my counselor, she was like, when it comes to relationships, friendships, and the women that you date, it seems like you always, you date toxic women and you have toxic friends. And I was like, well, I said, well, okay, do you know where toxic women, well, healthy women hang out at? And I
Yeah.
started going there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I told her, I said, you have to realize like I'm a nurturing person. So I attract
Mhm.
all types of people to come around. And it's not until we dive deep into, what we're trying to do, then you realize that, okay, we have some toxic behavior or we create a toxic environment. And I
Yep.
said, so I said, how you came up with that, it was a little inaccurate, but I understand what you're saying though.
Yeah. I
So
totally understand.
the things, let's see, the things that you learned, how did it make you feel? Like when you came into the realization of some of that stuff?
Um, it it was a little uncomfortable. It's kind of like have you ever done a budget after you've been broke for a while and you just really had to like realize like comb through your bank account and be like, I got to face the facts, you know? So it was a little uncomfortable, but then it was like, okay, it is uncomfortable, but it gave me hope because like, okay, now that I know it's a problem, now I can come up with a solution versus like not having the reality of the problem. I will never come to a solution. So, trying to escape that level of like insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and trying to, you're expecting different results. So it was like, okay, now that I know that these are some of my issues, I can work on those. And that's when it was like, man, when I left a job and I'm like waking up in the morning and I'm like, I don't have to go to this place. I don't have to deal with these problems. And now what kind of job would I want? Where do I fit? What is my personality type? Because I know what has drained me from those jobs or being in certain, romantic relationships. And I'm like, okay, this is why I keep, this is why I keep having these issues with these kinds of men. So be okay with just waking up in the morning and not having somebody to argue with, or wondering like, are they mad? And it's passive aggressive, like, am I mad? Did you do something to make me mad? And it's like, I don't know. That's why I'm asking this question. If you don't know if you did anything, then that's a problem. Like, that's why I'm asking this question. And you don't have to deal with that mind game was just so refreshing. So then I was like, okay, what can I do just to make myself happy? Because I had to learn at one point, I didn't even know me.
Right.
I had been in relationships so long that I was just doing stuff to make others happy, but I didn't know what made me happy.
Right.
I was like, okay, do I really like music? Yeah, I love music. But do I like this? Or like at one point, me and my child's father, we decided not to go to clubs when we went to college. I ain't never been to a club, but he had. And I was like, okay, I won't go to a club. But then it was like, wait, but he's been to a club. So why did I decide not to go to clubs? Was it just because he didn't want me to? Or do I really not do clubs? I can't say I don't do something if I never even done it to know if it's worth doing.
Right.
And not saying you should do everything, but it's just like like social settings. Like, why don't I go to these social settings? Am I this? Saying like, well, sometimes people act this way. Like college girls act this certain way in these settings, and it's like, but I've never acted like those kind of girls who act that way, act a certain way outside of those types of settings. I don't even circle myself around those kinds of friends. So how would I be that girl? Because if I was, my friends would leave me high and dry at the club. So then I was like, wait, I don't know what I like. I don't know if I like lounges versus clubs, which, I had to learn it. I don't like clubs. I like lounges. Do I like to dance? Yes, I do like to dance. How much do I like to dance? I didn't know those things, but it was like, okay, you can't just gonna make him mad. Or, this is kind of, women that people say that they like, but it's like, but growing up and you see all kinds of relationship dynamics. And it's like, there's all kinds of men, there's all kinds of women, and there's all kinds of people together. Who are you worthy of? I would say another thing I had to learn too is be the person that you want to attract. If I want this tall, buff, person, or, I don't like short dudes. So if I want to attract a tall guy, tall people see up high. I'm down low. So I can't be the meek and mild person off in the corner. He ain't gonna see me, he too tall. Or, if I want a man who has six figures, I can't have a $20,000 mindset.
Right.
He's gonna be like, you're a liability to me. If I make six or seven figures, I can't be with a person who's a liability that will make me lose all my money. So that was a big thing too. It's like, be the person that you want to attract.
I think when I realized just the things that I started learning, for a moment, I was in denial about it. I was in denial because I found out that I was in a toxic relationship on my job. And then I realized that I was in a toxic relationship in my church. And
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't want to stop going to church, or I didn't want to leave my job. So I was like, no, let me just sit in that. Let me just be comfortable with that. And so I was
Yeah.
in denial because I was like, nah, even though you're being mistreated, I don't want to let it go. I don't want to leave it
Mm,
alone.
yeah.
So I had to, learn from that. And I got two questions, then I'll let you go. I appreciate you being with us on today.
Yes.
Did you have to heal from what you learned from?
Oh, yes, I did. Um, I had to heal because I learned that some of my stuff when it comes to my relationships, some of it was because of, my family, and I had to think like, okay, if I'm in this toxic relationship, why did I accept this for so long? What made it okay for me to accept it for so long? And I would say, like, for me and my dynamic, especially like in abusive relationships, for instance, my dad has never put his hands on me. I don't know what it feels like for my dad to even bump me too hard. Um, so to be in a relationship where I'm fighting a man, it's like, why?
Mhm.
Um, but I will say part of it was because they learned about my insecurities, like with my body, because of how my family treated me. I wasn't a big child, but all the women in my family were like they gained weight. So then it was like, okay, they would be hard on me. Like sometimes I'll go, to like the family functions and I'll be like, hey everybody. And it's like, instead of saying, hey, it's how much you weigh now.
Mm.
And it's like, what? Or, it's a dinner and I'm eating, putting stuff on my plate and they're like, I see you over there with the cornbread. And it's like, the cornbread you made, you know? Or I
Mhm.
see you over there with them sweet potatoes and that corn and, and you got the juice. Like, these are the things that y'all made. Why is it a problem if it's something that you made?
Right.
So I was like a little kid and I would be exercising all the time, trying to get my body the way it needed to be. Like I was doing buns of steel as an 8-year-old. I'm saying like what 8-year-old wants buns of steel and abs of steel? Like
Right.
why was I doing that? Wearing ankle weights. But I was, and understanding that I had to tell my family, look, these are the boundaries because I can put this boundary with this man, but he's going to keep playing on that weakness because he's literally seeing what they're doing. So I had to say, look, if y'all aren't going to act like how y'all supposed to act with me, then I'm not coming around the family anymore. And I meant it. If that meant that I had to hang the phone up on family members, like you're not going to talk to me like that on the phone. And since I don't like to argue, I don't like to raise my voice. Like it sometimes physically hurts to raise my voice. So since I'm not going to win this yelling match and it's actually like a waste of time and I have narcolepsy, so it's going to really truly drain me spiritually and I'm going to have to go to sleep, I'm just going to hang up the phone. And when
Right.
you're really ready to apologize, when you're ready to talk to me like you have some sense and we can actually talk about the issue and not do this like this ego battle, then you can call me back. But until then, don't call my phone and I won't call you. So when I learned like that was okay. It's okay. Like you're an adult. Yes, respect your elders, but we're taught to respect our elders, but we're not taught that our elders should respect us. With children deserve to have boundaries. If a child says, I don't want to hug you, it's okay. That
Mhm.
child does not want to hug that person for a reason. Do not go force that child to hug somebody. So when I learned that, and I learned that from children, working in juvenile probation, I was like, children are allowed to have their emotions. Let them sit over there and cry. That whole like hush, hush it before I give you something to cry about. You did give me something to cry about. That's why I'm crying about it. So it's like, what you mean? I'm confused. So when I learned those things, like even with certain kids, I learned that they will battle and argue if I just said be quiet. It was like, I'm not gonna be quiet. And I'm like, look, I told you. What da, 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 and it's like, okay, you know what? That's how they respond. So when I would ignore them, they would be quiet
Mm.
because they didn't have an audience.
Right. Right.
So I was
Right.
like, that kid likes to have an audience. he likes to prove himself around people. That kid, if I tell him to be quiet, he just doesn't want me to talk to him in a disrespectful way. Like, stay in a child's place. They know they're children. So you don't have to stay in a child's place. Hey, I just need you to be quiet. I have the floor right now. And then modeling behaviors. So that was another thing too, is like, you have to do what you expect. If you want this person to be financially wise, you have to be financially wise. I can't be like, oh, my husband making all the money and, and he's making like 6 or 7 figures and he's, I got just unlimited access to his bank account. I can't just be swiping like it's a dang on pack of Skittles. And even if so, the bag's gonna run out, so therefore I have to be financially wise too. And being willing to learn, like I said, I learned from children a lot of stuff when it came to relationships and family dynamics, even helping my family heal. To be like, hey, don't whoop her just because she's over there crying. You don't like to hear her, sulking and carrying on. And it's okay, let her sit in her emotions. I learned that from children. Just hearing them say, I'm used to y'all fussing at us. We're used to y'all telling us what to do. We're used to y'all talking to us, but not with us. And it's like, yeah, sometimes we just talk and talk and talk. And we never take a pause to say, how do you feel about it?
Right. Guilty. I'm guilty of that. I need to learn that. I'll be texting you a little later to help me out with some of those things. Did I have to heal? I had to heal. I'm still healing, and I'm going to heal tomorrow from the things that I've learned. I've learned that healing it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I heal and I think I'm finished in one area, you might meet somebody or experience something that, you discover a new pain. And I think here's one of the things that healing is so important is because when you're not healed in a certain area, you overcompensate in another area. And so
Mm-hmm.
you don't use, so if my heart is messed up, then I'm using just analogy so we can understand it. But if my heart is not beating like it's supposed to be, then I'm doing something, I'm overcompensating with my legs to mask the deficiency of my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I start using my heart like it's the way it's supposed to be by healing, then I don't have to put so much weight on my legs. And now that can give me so much sense of relief because I don't have to do so much like I'm used to doing.
Right.
So healing is very important, is very necessary to me in my life. So I've learned to stop overcompensating. So my final
Mm-hmm.
question that I will let you go, and again, I appreciate you doing the podcast with me. From what you learned, how do you or are you approaching relationships different?
Yes. One, I'm okay with not being in a relationship. So that took a lot. Um, Also because I had to take time to learn me. So I become okay with focusing on my goals so that I can be in that space where I have to be comfortable with me first
Right.
in order to expect somebody to be comfortable with me. If I don't feel that level of security for myself, how can I provide that security for someone else? Like two broken people can't fix each other. They got to be fixed first. But like you said, even when it comes to trauma and healing, you're never going to be healed. You're going to have scars, just like if you get stretch marks, if you grew too fast, you got stretch marks. Those stretch marks aren't going away.
Right. Right.
But you do have to understand what you can do and cannot do in those areas where you have those stretch marks. Like a woman who's had a baby and she has stretch marks and she's had a cesarean section after her skin is stretched to max capacity is why she has those stretch marks or stretched too fast. When she has that cut, I can't wax over that cut. I can't wax over that scar. Even though it's healed, never again can she ever get wax over the scar. But hair doesn't even grow in that area anyway. But
Mm,
I do have to be mindful of the nerves around the area where I do have to take the hair away from. Be mindful that she's going to be sensitive in that area. Um, it's going to sometimes feel like she's being cut all over again. Um, so as long as she's aware of it and I'm aware of it, then I can, walk accordingly or move accordingly as, her therapist. So it's the same thing in a relationship. If I know that I have some, um, like for instance, like me having, I lost my child. So I cannot get with a man who's high strong on like I need a baby, I need a baby, I need a baby. It's a nice to have. And that's just what you're going to have to be mindful of being in a relationship with me is if you don't have kids already, you just got to know I would love children too. But, sex education, they just didn't teach us everything we were supposed to know. So
right,
therefore, you have to have in mind it's a nice to have, especially at my age. You know, when you get older, things don't produce like it's supposed to do for men. And for us, some things just can't be sustained as normal.
right.
So, understanding those things even when it comes to scars, I, me not having my child will be okay with when I do discuss my child because I'm okay with discussing her. Um, so also be kind if I do get pregnant or don't be in my womb like, oh, why you ain't pregnant yet? That's my womb and that's my business.
Facts, facts. I think if I think it's a difference. Most people say they learn something, but really they just acknowledge something.
Mm-hmm.
When you learn something, you automatically move different from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the bottom line. I'll give you this example and I bid you farewell. But I was recently been looking for a job and the lady was asking me, she was like, you've been at your company for, a long time. Why are you interested in looking for a job? And I said, it's multiple reasons, but I want to, the ones that I would share with you. I said some other, articulate, nice stuff. But when I got to the
Mm-hmm.
meat and potatoes, I just told her, I said, number one, I want to do something that I enjoy. And I said, I want to work for a company that I am valued, appreciated, and respected at.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because I learned that the company that I was at for so long, I wasn't valued. I wasn't appreciated. I was taken for granted. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you really learn something, you're supposed to move different. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a difference that most people acknowledge certain things that they had in a toxic relationship, but they really don't learn from it.
Yes.
And so when you understand the difference, I think you're supposed to move different. You need to move different. And you show your growth. You show your vulnerability, your uncomfortableness.
Mm-hmm.
So, ma'am, I thank you for blessing us on the podcast. I hope our audience have learned something and gained something, and they go on their own journey from learning. Well, hopefully, I hope you ain't never been in a toxic relationship, but we're in 2022, so it may have happened. So,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna give you the final farewells and anything you want to leave us on.
Well, I will say I definitely appreciate having this conversation. It was definitely a nice and refreshing, conversation to have. And I'm glad that, you have this platform because, a lot of people do need to hear different perspectives and knowing that it's okay sometimes to be transparent about what you've gone through because it's not just for you. I'm not saying that you should go through things, but it's not just for you, it's for other people to hopefully, you will help, somebody else get through whatever that, they're dealing with that you've overcome. Um, so I appreciate having this platform to speak with you on this.
Man, I appreciate you, and I can't wait for us to do it again. Until the next time, good people, I'm Kenneth Ray Coleman Jr. and